gear and loadouts. So, normal stuff. Let's do the admin first. I'm in the workshop. I've got the door open because it's roasty toasty. The dogs are about to be fed, so that'll be noisy. And the neighbours are apparently running around the house screaming, so that's also going to be noisy. Thanks for watching. We've got a great guest as usual today, Mr. Ben Webb. How are you doing, Ben?
All good, mate. All good. All good. It's becoming a bit of a habit now, isn't it?
It is. I see you're in our local, mate, the Crown.
Yeah. We've managed to virtually visit the pub to have a couple of drinks tonight. So the wonder of virtual technology and rudimentary green screening has transplanted us into our favourite outdoor local.
Oh, mate, I could smash a few in there. So Ben, don't worry, Ben isn't breaking lockdown. He's just using the Skype virtual green screen feature, which is quite entertaining when he starts moving around because his head will disappear and stuff.
Yeah.
So who have we got joining us? We've got Kate Ferris. I believe that's your mum, Ben.
It is. I mean, Mum's turned up. She's going to have a go at Airsoft when she's allowed to.
My mum watches.
She's a crack shot with an air gun, though. So
my mum watches as well, which is a bit terrifying. Matt's here. Ricky's here. Sam. Brilliant. Already arguing about which is better. You'll probably find out probably not what we're going to talk about today, but there you go. So what we are talking about today is gear and loadouts, and something quite close to both of our hearts, and we've got some fairly different opinions to a lot of people on what you should wear and why and when and all of that kind of stuff. Not particularly controversial, but we certainly have opinions. So we want to talk quite a bit about that today. But while we wait for some more viewers to join, Ben, should we talk about what's in your cup today?
Yeah, well, I popped down to our local Six Barrels in Hockley in Nottingham and picked up a few cans. It's one of those phasing in and out cans. But that's some Endless Summer by a local brewery, Black Iris, and that was supplied by our good friend Ezra at Six Barrels. If you're in the local area, Nottingham anywhere, do stop by because I think they're doing collections as of Thursday to keep you all juiced up. What have you got?
I've got Australia. I love it. So it's quite hot, and I fancy something cold, a bit fizzy and continental today. So got myself some supplies.
Good.
So it should be all right. Have you been up?
So we've got the fundamentals down.
Have you been up to anything this week?
Yeah, been for a bit of a run a couple of times. Went for a bit of a run this morning that didn't go very well, so it turned into quite a long walk. That turned into picking some beer up. So best intentions and all that, but just been trying to keep it real. I'm back at work at the beginning of next month. Whether we know if that'll be from our office or working from home, we haven't quite worked out what that'll be yet. But looking forward to getting back and obviously getting back into the old airsoft sales world and sending some guns your way.
Sweet. Oh, Matthew Johnson says, amazing graphics. It's almost like Ben is sat outside. I was in a jungle earlier, and we decided it'd be a bit too confusing. Okay, cool. So we've got loads of people here, loads of people in the comments. That's awesome. So I think what we need to do is kind of set the tone a bit, Ben, and just kind of quantify just a few words that we're going to be using for the next hour or so. So let's start off with what do you think the difference is between gear, loadout, and impression?
Well, I think therein lies a fairly pertinent question, to be honest, because a lot of people get the different concepts a bit confused, and I think we're going to go into that a little bit more. But I'd say your gear. A lot of people tend to call it gears because of the sort of Eastern translation. So you go on like Toy Soldier, HK, and things like that, places that we used to buy a lot of our stuff from before it was a lot more readily available in the UK or even in Europe. They call it gears, but I think that is the individual items that you make up your loadout or impression from. But you'll select your gear to do the job that you want to do it, and that's kind of as far as it goes. So that could be anything. That could be a load of stuff that you picked out of a box and chucked on that morning, or that could be, your trackies and a hoodie for the day. Your loadout is kind of a little bit more of an ensemble of all these different bits that are all linked together and that all work together to allow you to be comfortable, to be active, to be protected, to have all your equipment up close at hand, and that all comes together to form your loadout. And there's a pretty important distinction to make between a loadout and an impression.
Okay. So
a lot of people call just loadouts. I'm doing my SAS loadout. I'm doing my Rhodesian loadout. Yes, you could probably say it's a loadout. Oh, it's my Rhodesian loadout. So I could do a Rhodesian loadout now, and I could go and grab some of my 511 shorts and probably roll up the legs a couple of inches. I could go and grab my Craghopper shirt, which is kind of like a tan shirt, and I could chuck on a Rhodesian rig over the top of it. And that would be like a Rhodesian loadout because it's sort of inspired, but it's not an impression. None of the bits of kit are actually correct, but you just kind of get that look. And that would be the terminology I would use when I was writing stuff for magazines, and it just kind of cements it. But if you're doing an impression's a different thing. An impression is where you are picking an image of a guy or a girl, maybe, in a particular scenario, that's a real wartime image, and you go to every effort to replicate what's in that image, whether you're using actual dated period kit. I mean, that's a term that probably needs to cut. Dated period kit. If you're using something that's period or dated, that is something that was actually in existence at that point in time when that picture was taken, that could feasibly be that actual item that's in that photograph. One for one, that item could still exist in this day, and it could be that item. I mean, that's going to be very rare because it'd be incredibly hard to track these things down, and they'd probably be far more valuable than anything you'd want to go trudging around in a field in. It'd be a museum grade piece of equipment then.
Yeah.
So that would make it a dated piece of kit, and then you can use replica pieces of kit. You can, a replica of a Vietnam third pattern shirt or something like that. That's a modern reproduction of something that was made back in the 60s and 70s, that kind of stuff.
Well, a lot of that stuff's now kind of museum pieces, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
There's only so much of it. I think there's some stuff. I think Gadge is in the comments, so he can comment if he can help us comment on period stuff which you can skirmish in because there's still shitloads of it, and period stuff you just don't want to do. Gadge, if you can drop a comment, that'd be fantastic. But yeah, some of it is irreplaceable now.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, one of the most amusing things I find about that subject is you find something nowadays that is proper period dated. It's probably going to look pretty old and quite rusty, and people will really love it because it's a period dated piece of equipment, but it'll actually look old. So if you're going to reconstruct a loadout, unless you want to look like Universal Soldier that's been on ice for 30 years or something like that, you actually might want a slightly more crispy, slightly more brand new reproduction, a modern reproduction of the older stuff. That's always just one thing that's amused me a little bit. People didn't go and fight World War II in a load of old looking equipment, did they? So
yeah,
it was probably equipment.
I think you got to kind of pick your. I mean, I bought a Vietnam pith helmet to do Vietnam Airsoft in, and I left it in the garden for 4 weeks just to get some rain and some sun on it to fade it and get it dirty, so it didn't look like. Yeah. But then you could look just like a bloke that's just come out of training and has just been issued a helmet. I've always tended to think.
Well, it's sorry, Tom, carry on.
So I always think it's always good to get a bit of dirt and wear and something. I'm going to get Callum Dust Monkey on the show. Actually, I want to talk to him about weathering gear to make it look more convincing, because your immaculately dressed average skirmisher doesn't look like a soldier. So how do you end up looking like a soldier that's been in the field for a week without stinking like a stinky Pete the whole way through? Because it's all well and good. You can roll in mud and never wash your gear, but that's not very pleasant either. It's one of those. Gadge says, it's not a good idea to skirmish in anything that you can get a repro version of.
Yeah.
If there's a repro version of it, I guess there's probably a reason there's a repro version of it. So,
yeah, definitely. I think that's absolutely true when it comes to historical kit.
Yes.
But one of the things we are going to talk about in a little while is the difference between kind of this older kind of historical kit and newer commercial tactical gear, and the difference between commercial gear and issued gear, and where those two things cross over. Which is, I think, is an interesting situation, and it seems to be quite a big cause of confusion and kind of people miscalculating the value of certain objects and maybe paying over the odds or maybe expecting something is let's not beat around the bush. People pointing at a pair of cry trousers saying, why would you buy a £400 pair of trousers to play airsoft in? And it's like, they're not £400. No. Certain pairs of cry trousers are £400, but the one I'm wearing isn't, and I can buy them brand new direct from a web shop, just like I can fishing tackle. So yeah, that's something we were going to move on to.
We'll do that in a bit. So let's finish off. So we kind of defined. So gear is like your individual. That's just your stuff, right? Now we're not saying what we're not saying is this is the definition. We're just saying this is the definitions we're going to use in this show, because otherwise we'll get really tongue-tied. Loadout is kind of a collection of your gear with a bit of a theme. But it's not.
A bit of a thought to it. It could have a theme, or it could just have a bit of time-honoured honing and a bit of tweaking to it and things like that.
We'll go into that in a bit as well. So impression. So let's talk about an impression. So what would you define as an impression?
I would pick up kind of like as an impression, you've picked a date, for instance. Ideally, you've picked a reference image. And the purest impression is going to be that reference image dated, and you copy exactly what's in that image. The loosest version of the impression, I think I could pick up. I think Gadge actually said that's often called a reconstruction as well, which is completely fair.
Yeah, I think that's probably a nice term actually.
Yeah, the loosest impression I could think of is somebody picking a number of reference photos that they know are from a similar area, a similar time period, a similar group of people, and it's kind of aggregating them and averaging them out to get an overall accurate, plausible look. So there's nothing to say that if you go through all the pictures in enough detail, you'll find that guy has picked up that guy's backpack and he's carrying it instead, or something like that. It's all plausible that one of them or all of them could have exactly those items, that holster, they'd put it in roughly that position, and they'd be wearing these pouches and things like that.
Yeah, there was an interesting article on Reptile House about that, about the kind of the different levels, and I forget the terminology he used, but it was interesting because it was like, as you say, it's like that man in that picture, I want to do that, and then there's like the more general stuff that we know that unit might be wearing, and then there's the kind of, well, this stuff's quite cool, and I might. So there's kind of he almost had like 3 different tiers of impression built into it. But I guess in the strictest term, impression. If you're doing an impression of someone, you're going to copy them.
Yeah. I mean, impressions get a little bit more complicated, especially when they're modern impressions. When you can talk, so potentially slightly less modern, slightly dated impressions. You talk to a guy, and he said, "Oh, when we were doing this, that, and the other, we wore this, and we would have worn it like this." But there aren't really any pictures of that. Who are you to question him? He was the guy that's saying he's been doing it. If you've gone around the gun shows and the various different airsoft sort of expos and things like that over the last few years, you probably will have bumped into some people that have done it for real, and they will say to you, "We did it like this," but you probably won't find any pictures of it, because back in 15, 20, 30 years ago, we weren't walking around with a digital camera in our pocket constantly. You'd be lucky if you got a disposable, and you'd be lucky if the picture came out in focus. Or,
it's interesting. Talking about, because there's often, if people talk to, particularly ex special force operators, if they probably weren't called operators at that point anyway, and they ask them really kind of detailed questions about what they were using, and for them it's a fucking tool, isn't it?
Yeah,
It really,
I have no idea.
really,
Yeah, it was the black holsters.
that black thing.
We used the black
No idea
holsters.
no idea who stitched it. No idea where it came from. No idea. They might have had a conversation with someone at some point. Even Larry Vickers was talking about his Delta carbine, and he vaguely knows the model numbers, but back then he was like, it's a Car 15, isn't it? I didn't care if it was a 723, a 653, a 727, or it was a Car 15. That's what it was.
Yeah,
it was irrelevant.
Maybe historical kind of the hindsight sort of thing is the only real, that's where the detail truly comes in, and people only really give a toss when they're looking at it from a historical perspective. When you're actually in the thick of it, when it's something new that's getting foisted on you on Monday morning, when you've just rolled back onto base or something like that, you probably don't really care exactly what it's called in this weird initialized format. You're just like, yeah, okay, so it's something new for me to carry this week. Brilliant. I'd rather just tune it off into the bin, to be honest.
James C says the Reptile House blog I was talking about referred to L119A2 builds, which is a very good article actually. I remember I've used it with my buying stuff for my current one, and it's about what's been seen, what's plausible, and what might what's actually been in a photo.
Yeah.
What's plausible because we know they're using it, and then someone's had a conversation. So it's one of those things. But
I'm not sure if it's the same, James C. If it's cheesy, I'm saying hi. But there. There's a bit of a rambling kind of approach to it, but I think there's there's guys you'll talk to and they'll tell you about stuff, and and it's well educated enough, and the source is valid enough for you to be able to say, I'm going to pick that piece of kit. I'm going to use that in all good faith because it's got the right provenance. It's come from the right place.
It gets really difficult when you're doing modern kit, because if you're trying to do the absolutely up to the date modern kit, it kind of changes every time the unit rotates. But again, we're talking about special forces here. Line infantry doesn't change nearly as much, but even then, there's still lots of change. There's a lot of if you want to do bang up to date British infantry right now on deployment, a lot of the stuff you can't get it. It's still restricted. There's still stuff on the restricted list. There are some there is some Virtus armor out there, but it's really probably shouldn't be in civilian hands. But that's another discussion.
I'm not sure why anybody would actually want it either. Everybody I've spoken that's had any kind of contact with it in a professional situation has said it's a bunch of dog toffee and it should be avoided at all costs.
I know, but I think it's quite nice. We're rambling, but we're always going to. I think it's quite nice when people do infantry loadouts and not super high speed mega special forces stuff all the time. Obviously, everyone wants to most people want to do the shiny stuff, but actually, sometimes it's really nice just to put the basic stuff on and not worry about it too much. But we can go into that. Right, we should maybe segueing into the next question I have for you, Ben. So
of course.
Okay, so lots of we did a bit of a chat and I did a bit of digging around before we did this, and one of the questions that comes up an awful lot is I don't want to do a milsim because my gear's not good enough. So should we dive into that topic a little bit?
Yeah. If you don't think your gear's good enough, I definitely don't think you should do a milsim if you haven't got the right equipment. But that doesn't mean I don't think my gear looks right. I don't think my gear has. I haven't got an impression, because there's one thing you need to make a distinction between it. And I've been to film sims that will require you to have an impression, and I've been to milsims, and milsims require you to be engaged and active in the game, in the simulation, for as long as you possibly can. And that doesn't matter what as long as you are wearing the correct team colours, which will be defined, as long as you are presenting the right outward aspect, you've not just gone and, some of them you might actually be allowed to dress up as the opposition force. And by opposition force, I don't mean just Op 4. I mean, you could dress up as one or the other if you can get your hands on the kit. And if that's in the parameters of the game, that might be a really nice way to gather intelligence. But it's not about having a stitch perfect impression for most milsim games I've been to. What they'll need you to do is either just wear multicam, wear tan, look like the faction that you're supposed to be, and from that pick up your waterproofs if you need them, pick up your thermals if you need them, pick up your base layers, your plate carrier, your different stuff. You can pick whatever you think is best for you, because it might not be that the stuff that you do use in impression suits you perfectly well. You might be a bit bigger or a bit smaller than that guy. You might not be able to comfortably carry that backpack. That helmet might not suit you particularly well, but you're wearing the right kind of helmet. And the same goes for Op4. I mean, I know you've been pretty well committed to it over the last few years, Tom, that the Op4 stuff isn't just. There are bits of high-speed gear that you can buy that you can use in an Op4 situation. It's usually just civilian kit that you can pick up. I know you've gone down a slightly more detailed route, and you've got kind of traditional materials and blankets and shawls and things like that. So if it's cold, you don't need to just fold in and suddenly chuck on your Gore-Tex jacket that's multicam, so you can carry on playing.
What was I going to say? I think we're gonna do an episode on Op4. I'm going to get some more guys in because it's an interesting. I think the whole topic around Op4 is difficult. Some game organisers don't treat them well enough. Some game organisers do treat them really well. Some treat them as meat fodder for the task force, and some give them. But and also there's I think you need to be respectful. And we'll go into that in greater depth in the episode. It's very easy to do the whole Durka thing and talk about goats a lot. But actually, is that really respectful? And I don't think it is. So I want to dive deeper into opposing force, and because opposing force, people you say Op4, people at the moment seem to think you're some sort of Middle Eastern tribesman. But I mean, Op4 is it's the opposing force, so it could be anything and anyone. You could be just as high speed as your Blue 4. He's talking about taking on Russian FSB Alpha, then.
Probably more so, probably more high speed and more adept if you really think about it, because these are people that are surviving in mountains, probably with a lot less money put behind them, and there's, like I say, you're either using civilian kit or you're using sort of traditional indigenous equipment, and I think to really do the whole Op4 thing and to have the right loadout for that situation, you can sort of do an impression, but you just got to collect the right gear, and it might not have it might not have Patagonia written on the label. It might be completely different sort of gear, and if you're into bushcraft and things like that, you might actually know a little bit more about it, because you think, oh well, that those items, that gear is what I need. It's not in a multicam pattern, it's not in US woodland pattern or anything like that. It's actually a usable outdoor gear that does the job, and you don't compromise the whole look and feel and immersion and theme of the game, which is really, really important.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you have to wear absolute tripe either. You can be very comfortable. I think looking at the comments, there's been quite a number of comments on, which I utterly agree with, which is much more about being comfortable, being able to play the game, being operational in shit weather, than it is about having really fancy stuff. If you turn up, as long as you can stay warm and dry to an extent, you can sleep okay, you can feed yourself okay, you can operate okay. I mean, I don't mean operate in a Gucci way. I mean operating is just being in the game and not letting people down because your drills are being shit. I think that's the really important stuff.
Not getting sick and falling asleep, because it literally happens when you're cold and you've been fighting off cold, or you get wet through and you're doing a longer game. And I don't mean to go down this kind of like hoorah doing a fucking long game like I'm better than everybody else that's ever played one or anything like that, but anybody that has done a longer game will realise that your normal airsoft game, you're there on site for 8 hours, but you're not playing or actively engaged for anything like that. It's probably less than 4 hours that you're actually actively engaged. So now crank that up over 36 hours. It gets dark and you go to sleep for a bit, and then you wake up again and it happens again, and then it gets dark again and you maybe go to sleep for a bit. So I always say there's this like big lull when you do these milsim games. Like there's the first evening's good because it kicks off. The second evening you're like, why the fuck am I here? Why am I doing this? Like I could be at home with my missus having something lovely to eat and having a couple of nice cold cans of beer, sitting with my feet up, or I could be in the pub or something like that. And it's a real mental drain. And to stop that mental drain, you have to have some nice things around you. You have to have the right equipment to keep you in the game. You have to be kept active. And it only actually becomes fun again when the sun comes up for the second time. and you have that last few hours of gameplay, before you can all go home, and it only really becomes enjoyable for me. You have to just push through that, like when athletes and stuff say they hit the wall, there is kind of a wall at Milsim games, and you have to push through, and you have to not get grumpy, and you have to remember that everybody's in the same boat. You have to push through, and then you come through the other side and remember that it's fun again. And then on the way home, you're thinking, fucking hell, I could do that 3 times over and over again because it was so much fun. But back to gear and impressions and loadouts, it's so important to have the right kit to sustain you through that amount of time. It sounds really trite to say it, but it really is important. And it's an expensive hobby. Unless you pick very, very wisely. In the past, I've not got the same amount of kit that I've had in the past, but I've had, the same waterproof kit, the same warm kit in multicam and in black and in like Op4 colours as well. And I've had to triple purchase just so I've got the same thing that I can use. So I don't have to compromise my comfort, no matter what side I'm playing on. And that's a really expensive thing to do. With some really clever purchasing, you can kind of pick the right items that work for you.
I bought a really nice Gore-Tex jacket in tan. Because I can I can wear that for Blue 4, and if I'm playing Op 4, I can always put a shirt over the top. And it's just, and that was a really, really nice Gore-Tex jacket. It's beautiful. But that was a one-off. That was a one-off purchase. But that's going to serve me very well, and it's light enough. I can actually get it under. I can get it under civilian garb, and no one's going to know the difference anyway. If I need to go and stand in the rain for 12 hours, which has happened before.
Yeah. That's particularly why you'll find people raving a little bit about certain brands and certain bits of tactical kit. And it's not just because it's got a cool label on it or because it's got an elitist price tag. It's actually because it's a really good bit of kit, and you can probably use it in more than one setting, and that's why it really works. And that comes into our modern kind of kit as well. With your modern kit, you probably find you can use that for a few different years, because it's actually a really valid and very useful bit of kit. And obviously, the more modern kit you get, going to go out on a limb here, but the more modern kit you buy, the kind of better it's going to be. I know some kit is, some guys stick by the classics, your wool and your stuff like that, but the kind of the modern stuff for me tends to work a lot better.
James is asking advice about getting a Plat Attack ASAD dump pouch. Is that your favourite?
I think it's the one that I'm wearing in the thumbnail on this was actually the first one that I got, and it was a slightly different model to the one that I've currently got. But the only place to get it from really is directly from Plat Attack or a Plat Attack stockist in the UK or Europe or wherever. I think
it's direct from Australia at the moment.
Yeah, quite possibly. Plat Attack are a bit strange in that they do offer stuff available commercially. However, they do generally just make shitloads of stuff for lots of people under contract. So they're not really interested in commercial sales. I got mine directly from a fella that probably won't be able to get any more for any foreseeable period of time. I would check out eBay. If not, you're going to have to import it from Australia, from Plat Attack themselves. But there's a bunch more kind of alternatives to that. It's not just the Plat Attack nowadays. There's a fair few different sort of alternative kind of hangy pouches. Like I say, I never bought that pouch. It's quite pertinent. I didn't buy that pouch because it was correct to a certain loadout or impression. I bought it because it was a good piece of gear and it actually suited me. I've always worn my dump pouch around the front. A lot of people started off like the US Marine style dump pouch that was right on the back of the plate carrier. And I was just like, I like the idea of being able to dump everything, but I also kind of want to keep an eye on it so stuff isn't falling out. And I also don't want to, and this sounds really fucking arseholey, Travis Haley, bumlicky style, but it's going to be a lot faster for me to take my magazine out, and instead of having to reach all the way around the back and drop it in there, to take my magazine out and just put it in the front.
I think that's a really interesting example, Ben, because it's an example of adapting kit for your purposes, which isn't necessarily in a picture of some guy you've seen on the telly. It's
no,
but it's a bit of kit that you like, you use, you're very used to. Your drills are used to doing that. That's just what you do now. So even if it's not, maybe you might well do, and I know you are putting together a UKSF impression, you'll probably still end up with that dump pouch on the front of your PC because it just makes sense for you.
Yeah. I mean, the weird thing is because I got that pouch with such substantial provenance, I was relatively confident that it would appear in pictures in the future because there's a bit of a delay between. It's like the worst buffering ever, or you're trying to illegally stream a movie of the UKSF. Everything takes a little while to come through, and because pictures aren't immediately released. I mean, it used to be like 5 years before an event would happen and then pictures would be released, but the way the world has gone now, it's a lot faster, and you can get stuff that day. People have started to use those kits, and we've actually moved on beyond those. There's kit that does a slightly different role. So this is what I mean about there being slightly different ideas out there now. There's different dangler pouches, different abdominal pouches that you can check out that might suit you better. The problem with the pouch I got is a bit of a compromise. I don't have to drop that mag around the back anymore. I can actually just drop it into the pouch in the front. But yes, if I'm sitting in the wrong direction or something like that, or crouching in the wrong way, it is going to bang me in the balls. Do I mind taking a little tap in the balls and then saving 30 quid on a recoil mag? No, I'm cool with that. I'll take a little flick on the nuts so I don't have to pay another 30 quid for dropping a recoil mag.
People will say, well, real operators would just drop them on the floor. You can tell me in the comments if that's true. Personally, I don't want to drop my 30 quid recoil mags on the floor unless I'm like crouching and I know where they are. They're going to go in a dump pouch. And the same way I have a Blue Force gear dump pouch on my kit, which isn't strictly impression correct, but I want to save my £30 recoil mags. It's like
it's just not going to be sustainable, is it, to keep dropping them on the floor and chucking them everywhere. It's just not going to be. If
the taxpayer wants to pay for my recoil mags, that's absolutely fine. But I don't really see that happening. Let's get.
I can imagine. Sorry, dude.
No, sorry. I was just going to try and drag us back to the question, which is, what do I need for a milsim? Do I need an impression? And I think we kind of touched on it. Sterling are actually not even a milsim operator. They don't call themselves a milsim. They do various different experiences. We've discussed that in a previous episode. But largely they have uniform requirements, and largely it's just camouflage.
Yeah.
Be it MT, so they have and then normally they have a tan side, which will be MTP, or multicam, or desert, tricolour, UK desert. It's just, as long as it's not green, it doesn't really matter. And then the other side can be more themed. Sometimes they have specific camo, sometimes they want civilians, sometimes they want Middle Eastern garb. But in general, it's really not that specific, and they're often seen as the kind of the high end of that side of airsoft. So I think maybe we'll just dive into that. You can put together something to suit that game at really low cost. You can go to Anchor Supplies, our local army surplus, and pick up issue surplus gear and walk out for less than 50 quid completely kitted out if you really wanted to.
I'll tell you now, you will get more respect if that's what you're in it for. You will get more respect in turning up with a collection of usable, actual reasonable equipment to keep you in the game for the duration of the game than you will for turning up in a bells and whistles SAS loadout and looking the bollocks, but forgetting the right sleeping bag. Somebody I used to work with, Jake, does a bit of helping out and a little bit of work with Sterling, and there's guys rocking up without even a sleeping bag. No, we just toss it on the floor. You won't. Not even on the warmest night of the year will you be able to cope without a sleeping bag.
Good God.
And I don't care if you've bought a PTW with you or you've bought your 15 different TM recoils. Most game organisers would rather you didn't turn up with a gun, but with the right equipment and enough water and things like that to sustain you. They would be refreshed. Somebody said, I only had 50 quid to spend, so I've actually bought plenty of water, plenty of food and a sleeping bag. Are there any BBs I can borrow from anybody? I would much rather somebody say that than somebody.
Even if you turn up with no gun and just go on obs, you'll be more useful
Yeah. I dare say you'd probably be a legend of the game if you turned up and did that. I couldn't be asked to shoot this weekend.
Turned up, borrowed some binos, and went and observed stuff for 36 hours and radioed in. Brilliant. If you can sustain yourself for 36 hours because you've bought water and you've bought food and you've bought a basher and you've bought a sleeping bag and you've got something to keep you isolated from the ground. Yeah.
You would probably be a legend for that. A lot of people would be incredibly refreshed if that happened. Oh, sorry, I'm just going down for number 2.
What are you going for now?
Oh, this is the orange one that I showed you earlier on, but it's phasing in and out of reality again. There we go.
Pulping on your stereo. Is this the orange boy?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Looking forward to that. Okay, I think it's a really interesting point. I think a lot of people get quite intimidated by kit and kit standards and all this sort of stuff. I think it's a bit different. So that's kind of your general milsim. I've never liked using the word milsim because it's such a huge general term. It's a bit different if you're doing historical, as we kind of touched on. If you're doing historical airsoft, there's almost more of a equipment requirement, but it might not necessarily cost as much, or it might cost shitloads if you're going to try to do something really specific. World War II obscure German unit can cost an absolute fortune. And something we talked about before we got going on the stream was about the kind of almost a social contract between players. As much as airsoft is about you having a good time, it's also making sure that everyone else around you is having a good time too. So, for instance, if you turned up to a World War II game and you want to express your individuality by wearing a big pink helmet, that's just not cool. It's just not acceptable for that kind of game. So
I've just had sorry, Tom. I've just had a really interesting analogy that might work.
Yeah.
So when you're doing these historic games, you've got to think that you are a character in a film. You're going to actually be in a film, but you have to supply your own props.
Yeah.
So no matter how prominent a part you want to play in this film, you're going to have to take those. I don't know if you've ever looked at buying kind of pre-used props or kind of film props, but there's different grades of prop. There's hero grade stuff, all the way down to you're going to be out of focus 3 rows from the front in the background, and that in the background guy probably just gets something that's the right silhouette and the right colour shirt and a rubber gun that looks just about right that's painted black. But then the hero grade guy has to have everything. Yeah, so I'm not saying you're going to be a hero if you rock up with the right equipment, but you will be able to play probably a more central part in the game if you turn up with a hero grade gear. So don't expect to turn up with substandard kit and be able to be a central part of that game, because everybody else has gone to the effort, at least some effort, to be a character in this story that's being told. That's the kind of important thing. And I don't want it to come across as kind of exclusive or kind of elitist, or I hate the term elitist being used in airsoft, even more than I despise elitists themselves. I hate the term. It just gets bandied around too much. But people have gone to a lot of fucking effort to put this kit together, and it's cost them a lot of money and time and probably a divorce or something like that. And they've had to go through it all. And you got to give them the respect, like you're saying. It's a respect thing for everybody else that's doing this. Okay, shit, I haven't got the best kind of night kit, so maybe I'm going to enjoy my role in the day where I've got the kit that suits, and let the guys with the night kit do their night stuff. It does without trying to. I hope you come across a decent guy that says, "Look, I've had enough of using my night kit. Please don't break it, but you can borrow mine for a couple of hours and go and experience what it's like." I mean, that's more common than not in airsoft circles, especially tight circles. People will let you have a go on stuff so you can be included. But sorry, I kind of diverged there a little bit.
I think it's important. I think it's important to talk about. I think a lot of people, and we've talked about inverse snobbery before, and we've talked about all this sort of stuff. And I think it's perfectly fine. And we've talked about almost low cost entry into milsim. Focus on being comfortable. Focused on being able to operate properly. Focus on sleeping, eating. As long as your silhouette's about right and you're about the right colour with your gear, fine. Doesn't really matter. If you want to spend more, that's totally fine. And if people want to spend more on their hobby, that's totally fine as well. It's like golf clubs, bicycles, every hobby ever has more expensive and less expensive options.
One of the most vital things you can take is actually free, and it doesn't cost a single thing. You can get it from anywhere, and the postage is negligible, but it's your attitude.
Yeah.
If you go to an event with the right attitude, and allow the whole event to kind of wash over you, and you get really into and immersed into it, you'll find everything is so much more accessible than you could ever have imagined, because everything just becomes easy, and the attitude is way more important. If you go into an event and you've never been to one before, hit some guys up that have been to one when you're there, ask them a couple of questions. Don't badger them all night or anything like that, because they're trying to have their own fun. But most guys, there's enough downtime for you to have a conversation for a couple of hours. There's enough time to pour over kit when you've got a little bit, and they'll be more than happy to tell you about it. In fact, they'll actually love, if you're listening, they'll love to tell you all about that kind of stuff. And yeah, the attitude is just the most important thing.
I'm just laughing at Dave's comment from Fate. As long as you're the right colour gear, good save. Yeah, I was minor panic there. I had to do a bit of a rescue, but you get what I'm saying, don't you? It's like it doesn't. It's one of those things.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so we've let's talk about. I'm kind of getting into it already, so let's push on to the next thing I want to talk about, which does it really matter what I buy? So, and I've kind of broken it down a bit into current day / commercial off the shelf gear, historical and retro gear, and open days. So should we talk about, you get some interesting points about current day and commercial gear and how that's developed over the last, 10 years.
Yeah. So should it matter what I buy? Should I not buy a certain thing? Am I depriving somebody of, back in the day, there was a lot of talk about, if you buy that kit, you're going to be depriving a soldier of it. And granted, if it's issue equipment, that may be the case.
Or if it's stolen.
I would advise against doing that, purely because it's illegal. And I think I don't need to say any more than that. But if you buy something that is commercially available, you are not depriving anyone of it.
Yeah.
If it's commercially available, there's enough of it to go round. The only people that would be depriving anybody of that commercially available tactical gear would be the government that's in charge of procuring the equipment for the armed forces in question. You're not depriving anybody of anything.
Any sensible company will fulfil their military contracts long before anything gets placed on the commercial market.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that brings me on exactly to the next point, is that a lot of the fact that a lot of the reason these bits of equipment work and exist and have been developed is because they're commercial items. So there was a period of time, we're probably talking 10 to 15 years ago, where tactical gear had heavily stagnated, and the term bomb-proof was being floated around a hell of a lot. Bomb-proof was the catch-all term for this stuff, and 1,000 denier to 1,200 denier cordura was used in multiple layers. And I say 1,000 denier, 1,200 denier cordura. That's thick nylon stuff. That's really heavy duty, like material webbing, like thicker than canvas kind of stuff. And that will be used in multiple layers, stitched together. And these massive rigs were being created with like four layers of stitching, like quad row stitching and things like that, just to make it just so tough and dense. And yeah, it's brilliant. That will last you a million years. That will last until your grandparents want to do a reenactment of you playing airsoft. Your grandkids even, sorry. they want to reenact granddad playing airsoft. And that kind of went out of fashion because finally enough money was injected into the whole thing, and the equipment could be proven because it was commercially available. And the things like Cry trousers that are such a staple these days, like Cry Precision's equipment, is always been available commercially, parallel to it being issued with some slight variance to military forces. Some military forces will say, I love that, but can you do this to us? And because they want to buy so many, they will say, yeah, we can create you a contracted run of 10,000 units, and instead of using Velcro there, we'll use a button.
There's a strangely large amount of button fastened Cry on the UK milsim scene.
Yeah.
It's all coming out of one place. But carry on, Ben. Sorry, I was just.
No, it's fine, dude. It's fine, and that's exactly the thing I'm talking about. Sometimes the Velcro is replaced with buttons. Sometimes the pouches have to have flap tops, and you can tell why they've been designed in that way if you know what certain places look for. You don't want Velcro in places where Velcro might get clogged up by snow or sand. A button's infinitely more reliable and easier to fix than a zipper. Should you have to. I don't know if you ever tried to sew a zip, Tom. I'm sure Joe will be able to talk a bit to you about it. But sewing zippers into things is not the funnest.
I tried it once, and it's an absolute nightmare. Whereas sewing a new button on, even punching a hole for a bit of fabric, buttonholing it and sewing a button on, you can do in the field with a housewife's kit and your bayonet. It's really not very difficult.
Yeah.
Dave Oakfield's made an interesting point, which just kind of reinforces what you were saying, Ben. There's a lot of design coming out of the era where operators were leaving helicopters and APCs and walking 10 feet to their target. It was all as heavy as shit.
Yeah, and that's kind of been quashed because I think they realised that if you can sell stuff commercially, you can make a nice little bit of profit, and also there's a lot more emphasis put on let's develop something new so we can get ahead of the competition, and it all just kind of leapfrogs one over the other because if you can get ahead of the competition, you can get a contract, you can make a better piece of equipment, and you actually start to be in this competitive chain. Apparently wartime's one of the best times for medical and scientific advances. And with the tactical gear kind of thing, didn't really matter because everyone's making everything's the same anyway. So unless something comes in to give it a kick up the arse, it's all going to be practically the same. So now we're in this awesome period where a lot of older designs that are tried and proven are being rendered in new materials. And they're loads better for it because they're lighter, they're more water resistant, they dry quicker, they're more breathable, they're more durable, but they've got the layout of stuff that has been proven over time, which is super cool. Like Mayflower were one of the first to do that kind of stuff. Mayflower got picked up by Velocity Systems, I think, and the two companies got rolled into one, and you probably see a little bit more of that. But Mayflower have been doing great stuff for like a decade now, probably longer. They use older school stuff. It's kind of pertinent actually because Mayflower forged ahead in doing fixed configuration rigs that instead of making everything modular that you could strap everything all onto and put 15 different pouches on, they were like, you kind of don't need all of those bits and pieces. Yeah. You need this, and I can tell you with some authority that you need this because I've done it several times over, and this is the best rig for it.
So we've got some interesting stuff in the comments. Jamie says, back in the mid-90s, I had a genuine South African. I know you've got a genuine South African M83 that you had for years.
Cheers, guys.
And replaced it with a Viper. I think Gadge is a bit salty about that one. Replaced with a Viper DPM Sav. What a bag of shit compared to the original. Yes, absolutely. And
material changes there. It's the actual material that it's made out of that's essential. I don't know whether the South African one was made out of the material it was made out on purpose or purely because it was just available, but because it's quite compliant and the pouches can crush down when you don't need them, and you can wiggle a mag into place a lot easier than some stiff nylon-y fella. Not saying, I'm sure Viper, in fact, I know the guys from Viper pretty damn well and have done. I don't think that they even make the Sav thing anymore, but that was always kind of something they made because they were really into the surplus market. They've now moved into a completely different market. Yeah. And they even say that this is just beginner kit. This is kit that just people want to buy for the look and feel of it. We're not saying it's warfighting gear. We're just saying it's.
No, they're very honest about. People give them a bad rap sometimes. I think a lot of their initial stuff was. Some of their initial designs was really badly sewn. These days, it's all solid. It's all absolutely fine. But yeah, you're right. It's not stuff people are going to go to war in, and they're not pretending it is either. So Dave again. So those gear designs we've been talking about, all about armor coverage. Then he went back and did a lot more long-range, high-altitude stuff in Afghan. They realised you ragged to hell trying to hike over a mountain in full Ceres. So a lot of the big early armour vests, yeah, they've got full soft armour in, and they're full coverage. They go right down your body. cover your navel and your guts and everything else as well. And they've got hard plates in those. But then those vests are designed for armoured deployment, as we talked about earlier, jumping out of a helicopter or not jumping, but debussing from a helicopter or an APC and walking 10 feet into a fight. They're not designed for walking for an awfully long way. And I think that kind of asymmetric warfare we've been in is also, and we've effectively, most of the Western world has been at war for the last 20 years now. And stuff advances enormously fast.
A lot of stuff like that would have been designed because a bean counter at one point would have been like, can there be a piece of kit that does all of that, please? We'll just buy the one thing that does everything. Why don't we just buy the one thing that does everything and give that to everybody? And then the guys that are designing the kit are probably saying, well, hey, hang on a minute. Like, we said you can have this, but this is like the APC, or the SUV of the kind of kit spectrum. That's going to do absolutely everything. But not everybody's going to want that. So scalability came along. I think like most people know it as Marley, but I know Gage will be tweaking if I call it Marley.
Pals.
So I've got Pals. Pals was a thing that was supposed to be great for modularity and for changing things between missions and things like that. But it turned into this monstrous pain in the arse because it was really annoying to thread through, and it was secure when it was fixed, of course, but it was a pain in the arse. So people, fuck it, we'll put all the pouches on and I'll just use the ones that I want.
But then you want to fill you end up wanting to fill all your pockets though, don't you?
Yeah. The gear and loadout vibe comes in, or the impression vibe comes in, and you're like, I want to pick that guy, and it's like, yeah, that guy is the guy that is literally just doing the tanking out the top of a Humvee or something. So he has got 15 mags on top of him.
He's not actually going walking.
He's not walking 100 miles through the woods in a couple of days.
Or they're picking the radio operator who's got four radios. He's got two lightweights and a backpack and 4 antennas on him. And he's not actually doing any war fighting. He's sitting 100 meters behind with his antennas up,
wishing that he wasn't carrying so many antennas. This is where it kind of comes back into our loadouts and gear and impression kind of thing. It's really, really important if you're going to do an impression to pick a realistic impression. So if you know the game that you're going to is going to require you to do a lot of recce or a lot of like really fast, intense stuff, you're probably not going to want to take the super bombed up guy. I mean, the Vietnam kit was an absolute classic for it. I know a couple of my mates, Benno and Demo, had like the Mac V SOG stuff with the Stavo harnesses and like everything, and they were like, it's really fucking heavy to walk around in the woods, like, so we'll throw it on, take a few photos, then take most of it off, and then just go out with the Chicom and like a belt order on. Good old Chicom gets another mention.
Best chest rig ever. I think it's really interesting. I think one of the things I always remark on is I go to a woodland site, even just for an open day, and I don't know, 95% of the players have got plate carriers on.
Yeah. It's a bit of an odd one, isn't it?
And most of them without any plates in, which is always a bit bizarre. But that's, fine. But it's like, why are you wearing direct action kit if you're going to be playing scenarios which don't involve you kicking down doors and doing direct action? Which is always...
There we go. That's people wanting to do a loadout or impression to suit what they enjoy doing, but not necessarily sensitive to where they're actually going to be going and playing.
Yeah, and it goes into camo choice as well. This always makes me laugh a bit. Multicam in UK woodlands isn't very good. I like wearing it, don't get me wrong, but it actually is as a camouflage. There's way better stuff out there. So
it does better than Desert DPM though.
It does, yeah, true. But it does make me. I think it kind of goes back into our point about. Does it matter what you wear? No, it doesn't really matter what you wear, but you might want to, and as you say, tailor your kit to your operational environment and what you're doing. It may be, I very rarely see belt kit or webbing being used by anyone, and in most British woodland sites, it's probably by far the best option is having your pouches on around your hips. But then very few people, I know Gadge is probably in the comments laughing, very few people go prone.
Yeah.
Which is what
sure. Like,
which is what.
So sorry, Tom. Go on.
No, Karen. I was kind of rambling.
No, I was saying it kind of brings me on to my own point, and my own attitude towards it. It's going to make me seem a little bit arrogant, I would have thought, but my own approach to making a loadout is not necessarily going down the whole impression line. But I've always thought that if you truly understand kit and why the kit exists, and you use it in the way that it should be used or the way it's designed to be used, you actually probably get the coolest impression going, and you won't be far from the mark. Because the reason that all of these impressions that you're looking at, the reason these photos were taken, is because by and large somebody is applying a piece of equipment in an area that the piece of equipment is needed. And if you go down that route, it doesn't take all that much understanding, that much training, and that much familiarity for you to start actually going, well, fucking hell, I've never seen that reference photo, but I'm using that picture, I'm using that equipment in exactly the same place that guy's going, and he's a real deal guy. So I kind of feel like I might be going down the right lines with this. So, you know, and I'm not claiming that I was the first person to do it or anything like that, and I'm sure lots of other people did it completely parallel to me. But, you know, the Safariland holster with a mid-ride strap and things like that, you know, that was something that developed out of necessity, and I think a lot of people developed it out of necessity as well, that it's actually nicer to kind of have a holster as high on your belt line as possible. The holster's supposed to be secured heavily by your belt, and it can't be secured if it's got this big lever dangling down. So you won't see many impressions or real pictures, reference pictures of people using drop leg holsters, because drop leg holsters are a pile of shit.
Yeah, they went out in the 90s, but airsofters are like continually using them. And it ties into our point, Ben, because it ties into our point, because people have seen movies and computer games, and people still have loads of drop legs on, so they wear a drop leg, right? Drop legs were vaguely made sense, or would vaguely make sense, if you spent your life in a car or a helicopter, and you can rotate that. What they're meant for is you rotate that holster around on the top of your thigh, so you can actually sit in a vehicle or in a helicopter. And you're going to jump out of that and kick down a door and do some work. They make absolutely no fucking sense for 95% of airsoft.
Just biomechanically, it sound like Lucas from T-Rex Arms when you talk about this, but biomechanically, you want to have the weight of your gun, which gets quite heavy, in somewhere that doesn't move as much. But if you move that weight down the lever that is your thigh towards your knee, which moves quite a lot, it's going to feel like it's a lot heavier because it's swinging backwards and forwards much further and getting a lot more momentum behind it. So if you actually move it up to your hip, which is moving in kind of synchronicity with the rest of your body, not the out on a limb, that's why drop legs feel terrible, and that's why they come loose, and that's why you launch pistols a lot further and things like that. So even when people were using drop legs in the real world, not in computer games, because the guy in a computer game doesn't get modelled to, you know, when was the last time you did a sprint and realised that your pistol had flown out of your holster in Call of Duty?
It should give you like a 5% chance of losing gear every time you sprint. Yeah. That'd be like, oh, you're trying to throw a grenade. Oh, actually, it's behind me. Shit.
Oh, poo. But the pin's here.
No. And then you have to spend the next 20 minutes trying to find your pistol mag because you've just lost it.
Yeah. You can't start the next match on shipment because there's too many pistol mags dropped and everybody's got to work out which ones are theirs. That'd be great. But no, sorry, back to the point. Even guys that I know that are using drop legs were like, right, just fucking cut all that excess webbing up, cinch that up, and actually duct tape it to their leg. Literally, guys I know said, I have to use this holster because it's the one that we're insured to use, the one that's, you know, like the issued one, so I kind of have to use it. I don't have free rein to select my own, but nobody's told me anything about modifying it, so I'm actually just going to zip this strap up a little bit here and actually use duct tape to strap it to my leg for the duration of what we're doing. There you go, drop leg kind of fixed. And then as soon as like the mid-ride stuff came along, I bet people were absolutely pumped because they're like, finally a holster that doesn't eject my pistol across a field or anywhere that it doesn't need to be. And then the same goes with like placement of radios and things like that. You know, if you actually use a radio enough, you'll find that having it on your back's not a very good place for it for the majority of users, because you need somebody else to come and help you with your radio to poke it in, right, and to retune it because it gets knocked out or something's gone wrong. So like, yeah, it's kind of useful on your back because when you first put it on, you think, oh, I'll turn my radio on. But then when the battery goes, you're like, hey, I need my friend to help me. But then why do you need a radio if your friend's next to you? So having your radio in kind of that sort of accessible area is important, because you do need to dick around with it quite a lot. Usually, you need to check it once in a while. You need to see if it's still working. And
particularly with commercial stuff, if your connector's fallen out, or which it generally does, and then you
but just a battery goes, or you need to check how long your battery's going to last or something like that. You can't be completely taking all of your kit off and going,
or you've got a Baofeng and you've hit the monitor button and you've got Jazz FM coming over your headset.
Yeah, or you've hit the open voice button, and everybody else in the whole place can just hear for the next 2 hours, and you're like, nobody's said anything on the radio for a while. It's been really quiet. The batteries must have died.
I want to do a comms episode, but I need someone that actually knows what they're talking about, because I have no idea whatsoever.
I've got a bit of writing about them, but I must admit I totally need to refresh myself on them again. One of my buddies asked me if I could tell him how to tune his radio, so his young lad could use it with him when they went on a bike ride. And I had to go through it all and work out exactly how to tune it, and how all the frequencies and the CTS and the DCS and all that crap worked again. Bizarrely, I spent months working it out in the past, but it's just fallen out of my head because I haven't used it much lately.
I've just bought two, and I managed to brick them because I used an old. This is getting nerdy. I used an old image from previous firmware build that I had, and I forgot that I should cut and paste the frequencies and drop them in over the top of the new image, but I didn't. I just uploaded an old image and just bricked them. So I had to then put an appeal out on, and thanks to actually Tim, who sent me Tim Jacobs sent me an image of his Baofangs and got mine up and running again. So massive thanks, because that was a real pisser. But they were literally useless because I was stupid. So it's one of those things.
Poor old Tim gets a lot of beef over the internet, which is sad, because the only thing he's guilty of being passionate about is that people actually adhere to the laws that are in place. And you can't really take the piss out of a guy for wanting that.
Well, it's interesting that UCAC have now started clamping down as well. It's like, if you start talking about breaking the law, you're going to get banned. Well, and the people moan about it. And people, what do you expect? Really?
We all go buy a £400 radio setups, and then apparently that radios are actually completely illegal to use for civilians now. So because nobody's stuck up by the laws.
If you
that'd be a pisser, wouldn't it?
It's going to happen at some point as it gets more popular. And Ofcom are quite. Anyway, we'll save that for the radio chat. But I need to find someone that actually knows what they're talking about, because one thing I don't like doing is talking about stuff I have absolutely no idea about. I find it really disingenuous.
Over and out on that conversation, eh?
Roger. That's my dad's name. It's always really weird saying that. Okay, so we were talking about, does it really matter? And then we kind of sidelined into buying stuff which works for you. So let's dive into that.
Yeah,
continue that. No, it's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine, Ben, because I think it's interesting stuff to talk about.
Well, so one of the most annoying things, one of the things that pisses me off most about airsoft chat on forums, is people ripping on others for buying kit that they want. Right, and it's not just airsoft. It really pisses me off when somebody spends their hard-earned money on something that they enjoy and desire and cover over, and somebody says, "Why did you buy that? You're not an operator." Well, neither are you. Do you want it? You want it then? Can you have it? I'll give it to you then. You're obviously enough of an operator to have it. No, it's a commercial item that is available for commercial sale, and anyone can buy that. And if you prevent somebody from doing that, you're being a real dick. And I really can't abide by that.
It does my head in.
Why should you have that bit of equipment? Why shouldn't I enjoy that bit of equipment? I might not be breaking world records with it. I might not be the coolest operator in the world. However, just having it in my house is enough. It actually makes me feel really nice about it. So, if there was one thing for me to say, and I'm being completely genuine about this isn't about me trying to instill this idea that people should go and buy more things because I work in airsoft sales. This is the one thing that I would say about any hobby. What was I just saying to you about running shoes earlier on, Tom? I think I'm addicted to buying running shoes.
Yep.
I like buying equipment. I like buying gear and equipment. I probably don't get the most out of the phone that I've got, but I bought it.
I keep buying microphones.
Yeah, you do have a good voice though, Tom. I'm looking forward to your first album.
Well, Angelo did a nice comment earlier, so thanks, Angelo, for still watching, saying how professional I appear, which is bizarre. I'm an engineer by training, but apparently I can run a live stream. So who knew?
Getting the
hang of it, and it's a learning thing, isn't it? It's like you get into what you get into. I've been a cyclist and a skydiver and a triathlete and I've always been a bit of a gearhead. I'm sure if my mum's watching, she'll agree. I've always liked buying stuff. It's just what I like doing. I like buying stuff that supports my hobbies. And actually, what's wrong with buying stuff that supports your local businesses as well? It's like...
Yeah, well, buying stuff motivates me to go and do the things that I like doing as well. If and me and my partner Jody were talking about it the other day, and she was like, "You boys just love your stuff, don't you?" Like, I really struggle to go and do something sometimes, like getting up and I know Will, who lives with me and Jody, he's like our pet, Will Greenwood. A lot, and people will recognise the name. I'll just drop that right now. But Will's got really into his fitness blog and things like that, and he's been using this kind of lockdown period to kind of be motivational towards others. And one of the most motivational things that gets me going, if it gets me up one day, is just to buy something new to use, and if that lasts a month or 6 weeks and I'm really enjoying using that new thing, that's 6 weeks of me actually having great fun with it. So it's kind of worth it then, isn't it? Kind of worth it.
Yeah, there was a comment earlier, and I can't really scroll back through, but one of the viewers mentioned that actually what really motivates them is they see a really cool gun, new cool gun comes out, and they want to build something around that. And that, I think that's really awesome as well.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, back to kit, and I mean there are a couple of Facebook groups that I see, and they're fairly kind of, I don't want to use the word toxic because that seems like such a buzzword at the moment. It pisses me off. But they're pretty hot on ripping each other for, oh, why have you bought all that kit? You're not an operator. You might as well go training. Like, to spend more time training. And that's something that's bled through from Real Steel kind of attitudes. I follow quite a lot of Real Steel pages. And a few months ago to a year ago, people started really digging on people for having nice kit. Oh, yeah, but how much have you spent on training? How much have you spent on training? Maybe nothing. Maybe I just enjoy shooting my fucking gun with the nice toys that I bought, and maybe that's enough for me to actually enjoy my life whilst I've got it. Maybe that's enough. But no, that's kind of bled through into airsoft circles, and a lot of guys are like, oh yeah, but how much do you spend training? I'm not really sure. Like not that long, but I just like having all this kit with me as well. It's fun, isn't it?
Well, I think a lot of people it turns into a hobby. The acquisition of gear turns into a hobby in itself, isn't it? It's not necessarily about airsoft. It's about I want to own. I don't know. Boys are boys, aren't they? We like the hunt. We like trying to find that really obscure thing. We like, certainly for me, there's a motivation in what's that pouch? What's that dude using? Identify that pouch, locate that pouch, buy that pouch. Oh, great! And then 10 minutes later, right? What's the next thing the next thing I'm looking at acquiring?
So that's interesting though. So back to the loadout and impression thing that we were talking about earlier on. So the impression, you would kind of have this rule book written for you, but your loadout, you get your gear, you look at that and you think, would that help me? Would that suit me? Or you buy it through trial and error, raw trial and error. I mean, Dave's commenting with us at the moment. I know Dave has bought so much kit and sold so much kit, but after having all of that kit that comes through and he's tried it out, and his loadout might not be a perfect impression, but I bet it works really, really well because he spent so much time and effort on trialing this kit, attaching it in the right place, trying it in a different place, moving it around a couple of inches, wearing it for a lot longer, wearing it for a bit shorter. That kind of trial and error stuff really comes in. And unfortunately, a lot of the way to do that is you do kind of have to buy and sell a lot of stuff. You have to try a lot of stuff.
If you buy in the second-hand market, You can generally sell it for as much as you've paid for it. It really turns into, you might lose on postage, which isn't the end of the world at all.
No, and the real steel, good quality stuff that people will bag on you for buying. Actually, the reason I bought that is so I can try it out and I can probably flip it out and only lose a £5.
Yep.
You know, I bought the cheaper version. It cost me, a fraction of what the real steel cool guy kit would cost, but I'm going to lose all of that because no one's going to buy it.
I've got a TMC MRB belt, which is a copy of the Crime one. Although it's like a third of the price of the real one, I don't like it. Right? If I had waited and bought a real one and then flipped it, so I bought a real second-hand one and then flipped it, I'd have lost no money. Now, selling a repro TMC, even brand new in box with tags, I'm going to lose money on that because I don't like it. It's just doesn't work for me, and I'll go back to what I used to use. So yeah, there's an interesting thing there. Again, it gets a bit difficult. It gets a bit different when you get into kind of historical and retro loadouts because it gets a bit more specific.
Yeah, I think we should probably. I know it wasn't kind of in our script to talk about, but I think it's something that's kind of popped up. There's definitely a huge difference between retro loadouts and modern loadouts.
Yes.
So the way I've always thought about it, the whole reenactment thing is you kind of got carte blanche to buy what you want. Like if you want that specific loadout, you can look at a picture from 1941 or something like that, and that is your instruction book. That is where you go. And some people might denigrate a little bit and say, oh, what you've been doing, like eating donuts since 1941 or something like that, because you don't look exactly the same as the guy in the picture. But that's your fun. That's just somebody taking the piss out of you because they can take the piss, and people always do that. But modern kit is slightly different, and I often think the way that modern kit has gone is if you can detach yourself, and I don't think I'll ever do a current impression, because not only is it next to impossible and you just get into this massive vortex of buying kit and then things will have changed before you've ever really got time to get used to it, I'd always backdate it 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I'm doing this snapshot.
This is my snapshot of what I am doing, because then I can get that kit. But then if you want to play skirmish airsoft with the most bang up to date, like loadout based airsoft, mil sims, if you want to do a mil sim or something like that, loadout based airsoft that doesn't require you to do an exact impression, you can buy all this new stuff. Like Safariland holsters, like we spoke about with the mid-ride thing, there's an extra add-on that S&S Precision make that allows you to adjust the mid-ride and to detach the holster from the base unit and to swap it around into a different place. I'm not sure if they've been directly pictured as in use by people. You might not be able to pop a reference photo out. Gaz will probably be able to help us out if anybody's going to help us out. But that's a really Gucci piece of kit that actually improves the stuff that we know that's already in use. Yep. So if you're going to improve your loadout, you can go and then you can drop your holster down to various different heights. So if you're not wearing a plate carrier and you don't have to have that clearance, or if you're getting in a car, you can slip it out and move it onto a different base plate for a couple of minutes. And that you can enhance the loadout that you've got by buying new gear. You break the impression, but your loadout's better. It's more practical for you. So yeah, maybe the currently accepted impression helmet or something like that is a certain type of helmet. However, a new helmet comes along that's infinitely more useful. You might talk to the right sort of people, so you understand that helmet's got good provenance and the right people are looking at it. So in 3 months, 3 years time, your loadout might actually become completely correct, but it enhances your loadout. It doesn't enhance your impression. It enhances your loadout.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's and often if you can't buy the real thing, to a certain extent, sometimes the clone or the replica is rubbish, and it may be worth going for a lower price real thing, which is actually better, or going for something which isn't quite as correct, which is great. So I've had helmets. You touched on helmets earlier. So I've got an FMA helmet. Actually, I don't. I've got an FMA shell that's now had every single component replaced because it just wasn't good enough. particularly when you start actually putting night vision on your head. It's just not good enough. However, and I can't really justify or afford for the 2 night games I play a year. I'm not going to have a real Ops Core or Team Wendy, but maybe that PTS, that new PTS helmet, because it's 120 quid rather than 30 quid, but it's not 600 or £1,000, might be better for me, even though it's not completely correct.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
It's got a better suspension system. It's got a better shroud. It's got better rails. But it's not completely correct. But it may well be a better option for me as an airsoft player.
It's better.
Yeah,
I would definitely rather run that at a milsim where you're actually running things through the ringer and you needed to stand up. Night vision's a perfect thing for you to mention, and that's where the disparity in night vision that is correct and in use, and night vision that is usable for and affordable for airsoft players.
Give me a minute.
So.
Keep talking.
Go for it. How many airsoft players actually went out and bought the quad tube Navy SEAL kit, the DVNG-18s or whatever they're called? I can't actually remember. Probably nobody or next to nobody, apart from some really, really dedicated guys, has gone and bought that quad tube kit. But lots and lots of people have got pretty accurate Navy SEAL kit, and they probably use night vision on top of that. So that's a really good example of people having to make a little bit of a compromise in their impression to have a usable loadout.
Okay, so this is a Psyonix Aurora Sport. Okay, so I reviewed the slightly more expensive version on the channel. This is a digital night vision camera that you can just about press into service as a night vision device. Despite what people will tell you, particularly the manufacturers, who are claiming it's Gen 2 or Gen 3 equivalent, it's not a fucking chance. It does do some stuff really well. When there's low light rather than night, it's fantastic because it shoots in colour. But as soon as it gets dark, it goes to shit. It just doesn't. Yeah. It's just not there, right? But
we discovered that at one point, didn't we?
We
Bailey's
did.
On your right. No, you lost. I've gone. Bye.
However, this is the Sport. I think it's about 400 or 500 quid in the UK at the moment. It's good enough to get you going. It's not brilliant. You're not going to compete with Gen 2 Plus or Gen 3 guys, but it's good enough to dip your toe in the water into night vision. You won't be running through buildings at high speed, and it's a bit harder to navigate with, and it's certainly not clone correct.
Yeah,
but it's
that's a loadout piece of gear,
yes,
and not an impression piece of gear.
Absolutely. Yeah? But then who's buying ITAR restricted quad whatever tubes? God knows what the guys are using now. I'm sure there are some turbo nutters with them, but for most of us, when we choose night vision, we're not choosing impression gear because we just don't have access or we can't afford it. For most airsofters, this makes a lot of sense. If you just want to dip your toe in the water, I'm not paid by anyone. I bought this. I was a bit disparaging about the Aurora. I think they call it the Classic now because that was about 900 quid. It wasn't. It's kind of the price benefit ratio just wasn't quite there for me. This one, I'm a bit more enthusiastic about because it is 400 or 500 quid and you can use it. I mainly bought it as a low light camera for the channel, but if I'm going to play one of the 2 night games I play a year, at least I've got something. So there's an interesting kind of discussion there.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, pick your fight when it comes to loadouts and things like that. Like, don't feel like you have to go charging in and purchase the most expensive, the most exclusive thing. If you want to, go for it. Like, and don't let anybody tell you no, apart from your bank manager, and make sure you pay your rent and mortgage and stuff like that, and all that kind of stuff. But if you want something, don't let what other people think be the barrier to that, and don't feel that you'll be judged for having it. That's what I don't.
I think just be realistic. If you're buying weird gear like night vision and lasers and thermal and shit, just be realistic about what you're spending your money on and what you're going to get out of it. I'm not going to go toe to toe with a guy with dual Gen 3 pluses on with that. It's just not going to happen. Will I murder a bunch of dudes just wandering around in the dark? Yeah. But
yeah, unless you go waddling down the middle of the path in front of them, and one of them puts their torch on at the right
and then
time.
And then you can defeat this with white light very easily if you know what you're doing with white light. So it's one of those things.
So I guess that's where what they're kind of getting at when people start digging on people like, have you got enough training, things like that. But it's not really training in that sense. It's kind of common sense, like realize that it doesn't make you invincible. Realize that you aren't going to be able to purchase some sort of auto win button.
You need to get used to these. You need to get some time under them. You need to walk around. You need to get used to it. You need to put some effort in. You can't just, even really high end gear. If you go and spaff, what does someone say, $43,000 on a set of quad tubes. If you just put them on and you haven't set your gun up right, and you haven't got a laser, and you've never used them, and you turn up at a game, you're going to be in a right shit state, particularly when they get shot out because you didn't bother buying sacrificial lenses.
Yeah. So that's another flip side, and I know this is going to be kind of a little bit of a segue from the main title of the video, but people talking about training, so I either see people digging on guys for buying kit and not training, or people digging on guys for taking shit too seriously and actually training. And Jez Armstrong, I'm not directing that this is you. This is no personal attack on you or anything like that. I know Jez brought a conversation up in one of the group chats that we had, and he was kind of saying, like, there's a lot of guys that take it really seriously, and I can kind of see why you would take it seriously if you've invested a lot of money into all this kit, and it's it is your hobby. Why not take it kind of seriously, and why not buy this stuff and learn to use it? I would advise the same thing with if you bought a bog standard entry level AEG. I would say get used to it, understand how it works, spend some time shooting it. Don't immediately run into a game and then say this needs upgrading, because it might not. You might not have just set the hop correctly, or you might have been not using the right BBs for it, or something like that, or you might not be using the right battery, and that kind of thing. Don't dismiss things without spending a little bit of time using it and understanding, because more often than not, more people have come before you and used that, and that product that you're using is an end result of their input into a product. It's very rare that you'll come across a product and you'll be the first person that's ever used it, and you can actually say this product actually fails. It's fundamental process. This is what this product does. It fails at what they say it's supposed to do. It doesn't, because usually it kind of does. Like when I was reviewing things a little bit more frequently, I would often think, okay, so this hasn't met my expectations, so maybe my expectations are wrong.
Yeah.
Because somebody's put time and money into making this product. So obviously, maybe my expectations have shifted a little bit aside from what the product is designed to do. So I would kind of try and put myself in their shoes. And sometimes the product would just be total dog shit. Other times it would not be quite what it said it would do. It's very easy to get wrapped up in all this like marketing mumbo jumbo, milsim, fucking elite operator, game changing, all that crap. Probably isn't game changing. It probably isn't elite operator. It probably isn't change anybody's life, but it might do a little bit less than that very, very well.
And there might be a very small bit of gear which just makes your life so much better. So much easier.
So perfect example. The leg strap for the SNS, the Safariland mid-ride holster. It's like an 11-pound elastic strap that you thread through two bits of a holster, and it secures your holster. Absolutely stunning. Very, very easy to fit. Very, very affordable, but changes your experience fairly significantly. There's loads of little knickknacks and doodads about there that, like things that will mount a torch at a slightly different angle on your gun.
And if you've got a weird wrist, I've got a bit of a sore wrist at the moment, and there's certain angles I can't hold a gun at. Cycling wrist. I think it's actually the dogs. Anyway, but yeah, there's certain angles. If I hold a gun at, I get really sore hand. So I need torch mounts in certain places, and that may be a £5 little weird bracket, and it may not be impression correct. But if I use the impression correct one, I can't use my hand for a week afterwards. So I have to use that little thing.
So I think to kind of summarize that point about like impression correct, like people want to copy, and more often than not, and the reason why they don't do the basic infantry loadout and impression is because they want to copy what they perceive to be the coolest, alliest guy going. And the coolest, alliest guy going is going to be a special forces guy. But what makes him cool and alley? What makes him cool and alley is because his kit is designed to do the job that it's supposed to do. And you see it in all trades, and you see it in all different anybody that uses tools. Rarely will you go and see a carpenter working on a building site and all of his equipment will be brand new and unmodified. There'll be little things with bits filed off and like, oh yeah, I cut that bit off of my the safety thing off of my drill so I can change the drill bits a lot faster. And they'll have these cool little mods, which are equivalent to the little mods that you'll find in the Special Forces community, or even long-serving soldiers that are able to modify their gear and equipment. Mountain climbers, guys like that with packs, they'll change different bits. They'll have bits customized. Fuck knows how much time and money must be spent on slightly adjusting backpacks, trousers,
if you're busting your ass for across Dartmour for 24 hours or a week, you don't want that little thing buckle digging into you, because by the end of it, you're going to be a right shit state. Even if you just go hiking and your boots don't quite fit you, it's okay when you walk the dogs around the block, but 12 hours into your hike, you're red raw and you're fucked, aren't you? It's just not gonna. It's just not gonna work.
Funny enough, to our conversation we were having earlier on about what we were doing this week, all of my boots and shoes generally have the lacing. I don't lace things up in the straight crisscross or straight kind of like ladder sort of pattern. I have to miss out a lace loop around the widest part of the ball of my foot.
Yeah. And
I have to sort of like stitch it over that, and that allows the shoe to be a little bit wider over the widest part of my foot because I've got big ass duck feet. So that would be an alley little tweak, that you only really know about that if you start using the kit and you don't just go by what it says in the instruction manual. And the same thing happens with tactical kit, and the same thing happens with professional tradesmen and things like that. So the alliest loadout you could do would be to just use your kit and spend a lot of time tweaking it and honing it and doing those little changes. Why does this bit flap around? I need to fix this bit flapping around. So you mentioned Reptile House earlier on, and I know Rich has just had like a hanger made for the bottom of his Cry chest rig. And it's quite an intricate piece of equipment. It's like a molle panel with extra Velcro sandwiched on and things like that can allow him to fit the right kind of pouch that he wants to fit in a stacked configuration.
Yeah, it works for him.
Pouches. And that is how to build an awesome loadout, because you're making these conscious changes, not just chucking money into a pot and buying stuff because it comes up on a certain picture. You're actually thinking about things, and you're actually solving problems, and you're addressing those issues by changing something that needs changing. I've gone through the process several times. Like belt rigs for me, it's a bit of a compromise for me. Okay, belt rigs for me were a big no-no. Like I could not get on with like a battle belt. But this was before things like the MRB and the Velcro sandwich kind of belts existed.
Yep. I was the same.
I got into battle belts, and what you could get was one of the big Warrior Assault Systems, massive things. HSGI made a couple of big ass belts with pads on, and I had like tactical tailor style belt things with like harnesses on and things like that. Tried a couple of the cheaper Bullet things. Can you remember Bullet?
Yeah, I remember Bullet. I had loads of Bullet gear.
Don't know if they're still going. Oh, pretty decent gear, but it was designs that other people had kind of pioneered, and they made it for a great price. The closest thing I got to a workable belt rig was the HSGI Sure Grip.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a belt sleeve that you threaded a belt through and you clamped up, and it kind of had this like rubberized fella on the inside that sort of locked it into place.
Grippy stuff.
It was a cool idea for what it was, but it was sweaty as shit, and it used to ride up a little bit or kind of sag down if it didn't ride up, and it just felt like wearing a nappy.
I used to have I had the Warrior clone-ish with suspender. I used to have suspenders on it to stop it falling off.
Yeah, I think the option really was to have suspenders and let it hang down a bit, or have to do it up and it ride
really
up.
Tight.
And you end up wearing it like a corset and it sucks. And I just couldn't get on with them for so long. I could not get on with belts. And I was like, look, all I'm going to do is I'm going to thread my holster, which was a Serpa or a Safari Land at the time, or Kydex, directly onto my trouser belt, and a couple of pouches directly onto my trouser belt, like pistol pouches. And that was pretty much all I could run on a belt, because you can't really load up a trouser belt that much. And then the locked in Velcro layer belts came along. So the original one was that Ronin Sentry thing that everybody's had a crack at making their own version of. So the basically the Ronin Sentry belt had this. I don't know. I'll describe it. Sorry if I'm teaching everybody how to suck eggs.
No, go for it.
I'll describe it in case nobody knows. But it's basically a Velcro inner belt that's got Velcro spiky bits all the way around the outside, and you thread it through your trouser belt, and you actually lap it over at your fly to keep your trousers up. But it's got like this Velcro platform all the way around the outside, and then another belt with molle on the outside, or pals. Micro pals, comes around the outside, and it sticks and corresponds to the spiky Velcro that's now sticking out where your belt would be, and it layers over the top, and it's got a big clunky buckle, and you clip it together and tighten it up, and it stays rock solid. But it doesn't feel much different to your normal your normal trouser belt. It's actually nice and compact, but you can load it up a little bit more without it flying around everywhere. That was awesome. Of course, the original Ronin Sentry thing came with quite a heavy stitched webbing inner belt, the first thing that you threaded. So people started making those out of Hyperlon and selling them separately. Like Hyperlon's this like rubbery material, same stuff that the shoulder straps on a Cryo JPC is made out of, this like abrasion resistant rubber. Funnily enough, it's actually the same stuff that they make Rib or Zodiac boats out, I think. But it's water resistant,
it's dinghy fabric,
hydrophobic, abrasion resistant material. So they made that with Velcro stitched onto it, much like it is on the strap, and that would bring the inner belt down so it's a lot lighter. So not only do you buy this cool ass Ronin Sentry belt and import it for like 300 quid, you then have to spend another 60 quid on this upgraded inner belt because it's lighter and it's more cool. But that's just one of those little incremental changes that gets made to make that bit of equipment even better.
Tier started doing it, and then FRV and everyone.
I think what happened when Ronin made it, a company called ATS in the US that don't actually make things technically commercially, but they make things at unit level for the US Army and the US Armed Forces. So ATS started making Ronin kit. Or making it for Ronin, or using the same design, and it was all kind of done like Ronin had made enough and sent it to like Delta and CAG and shit like that, and they were all happy with it. So they'd made their little bit of the cake, and then it started getting mass produced by this bigger company. Then Tier made it afterwards, and then the cool thing is I was saying on a chat with somebody the other day, it's actually a really difficult piece of tactical equipment to make because it requires like a super sturdy sewing machine to actually get through all that webbing.
Big rigging or harness machine. There's a question I'm just going to answer quickly, Ben, before we move on, which is, but what's the difference between molle and pals? So it's a bit like Hoover and vacuum cleaner, okay? Pals is the original system. I think it's like pouch attachment ladder system. So all of your molle loops. I can actually hold this up.
Molle.
Pals, all these little loopy things that we all call molle, right? That's your pals attachment ladder system. Molle itself was a vest, so it was an assault vest, like modular objective something. Okay, so
there's modular lightweight load bearing equipment, I think.
Yeah, and they did Molle 1, Molle 2, and they were like assault vests that went over the top of American infantry body armor. So you put your body armor on, and then you put a big vest over the top. So PALS is the system. PALS is what you're actually talking about. Molle was a particular vest that used PALS. What's happened in common language is now we all call it Molle. So if you want to be a massive pedant like me and Gadge, you just correct everyone and say, actually, what you mean is pals. The two are largely interchangeable, but if you want to be more correct, you'll say pals, and then no one will actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a bit like what is it? The UCP and OCP camo.
Yeah, UCP as ACU and UCP. So ACU,
yeah, that's it, yeah.
Everyone calls it ACU. So that we're talking about the grey stuff.
Yeah,
which has probably killed tens of thousands of US servicemen when they chose the camouflage. Everyone calls it ACU, but that's actually the uniform cut. So before
it's actually quite simple because it stands for Army Combat Uniform.
And before that, you had Battle Dress Uniform, which was BDUs. Yeah. So Army Combat Uniform it's independent of the camouflage pattern that's printed on it. However, it's been associated with UCP, Universal Camouflage Pattern, which is universally terrible. And actually, ACU is a terrible camouflage, is really bad uniform as well. But anyway, so where were we, Ben?
I quite like some of the ACU stuff, but yeah, we'll leave that for another day.
So we're talking about belts. I've got an FRV tailoring belt, which is largely what we're just talking about, a kind of Ronin tier micropounds belt.
So that's a really cool example of you making a sacrifice in your impression.
I'm not using anything else.
Yeah.
Your
loadout might not be specifically based on a particular picture. However, it's better for you, and in that sense, it's actually infinitely.
It works. It works for me. It works for me. So my UKSF loadout stroke impression, which I'm still working on, isn't based on some dude in a picture off the telly. It's largely stuff which I know works for me, and I've talked to people and has either been used or might be used. I think there are some, certainly there are some Ronin tier belts in use. Are FRV in use? Don't know, but it's similar enough that I don't care, and that belt works for me, and I'm very happy with it. So I'm going to use it.
Yeah,
I'm going to make that sacrifice, as you've said, because that kit works for me, and because that kit works for me, and I've used it a long time, and I know how it works, and it's comfortable. I'm going to look more, operator. We're going to use that stupid term than if I was wearing something which I don't like.
Yeah, for sure. Like, if it works better, you're going to work better, and I don't think anybody's going to judge on that merit, is it? I think what it is, it's compromise, isn't it? You sacrifice a little bit of authenticity, so to speak, to make that compromise between accuracy and actual usability. And I prefer usability every time, and it's weird. I know a lot of the sort of slightly more, I don't know what the best way to term them. The games that people go to where people do stuff in a serious sense and do a little bit of training and actually try hard to win. I don't know what they are. I don't know what games they are, but people will probably give you a little bit more respect for running kit that is actually better, and kit that you've got that will hold up to the usage that you're putting it through, rather than buying some cheap tut from China that actually blows all its stitching out the first time you try and do it up, or the first time you bend over, or the first time you snag a door frame or something like that. Buy something good, even if it's not totally brilliant, for the impression.
So I think there's been a universal theme in using kit which works for you, using kit which is suitable for the game you're playing with and doesn't impinge on other people's enjoyment. Not wearing a pink hat at a World War II game. Not running around saying "Durka, Durka, Durka" because you think it's funny. It's about you don't. So even if you do an impression, it doesn't. There's also, you don't have to copy that man straight off the telly. That's entirely up to you. That's your fun. That's your enjoyment. And for me, it's just always about what I've always got out of Airsoft. So I'm a gun nerd. That's part of the reason I like Airsoft. I also like the storytelling. The storytelling is super important to me. And as long as I'm convincing enough to tell the story, that I'm happy with that. I don't know what your thoughts are, Ben, on that kind of.
Yeah, it's a weird one. There are definitely different types of games that you'll go to. Rarely have I ever gone to a game though that has required you to have impression grade equipment. And more often than not, the compromise will be acceptable for you to have something that you are comfortable and able to use, rather than something that looks absolutely perfect but falls off.
Even the more militant, I'll use the word, games, film sim or World War II reenactment type games, generally use a 10-foot rule anyway. If it looks fine from 10 feet away, it really doesn't matter. Get the silhouette right. The detail can come later.
Yeah, so I guess a lot of I'm no expert on repro kit by any means, but I would imagine a lot of the repro kit isn't actually built for airsoft use in mind. It's actually built for dressing up, reenactment, kind of standing around being like a living history guy.
Gadge, if you're around or another reenactor, could you just let us know in the comments, because that's quite an interesting point. Is it
up to physical use?
Is it up for skirmishing? Is it up for lying in a ditch, or does it all fall apart?
Evidently the original stuff didn't always do that. I mean, I guess there were some kippers in the past, but it's what choice have you got if reproduction isn't really up for you actually using it, and the old stuff, the dated period stuff, is just too valuable and too rare now for you to be risking in that fashion. Maybe there's a massive market hole or market space for a manufacturer to start making old school kit, but up to scratch, up to modern sort of durability standards and things. I mean, one thing I would absolutely love to get my hands on would be the German army sleeping bags with the sleeves on. You look like Godzilla when you pop your legs out the bottom of them, but they're awesome, really really useful for kind of like milsim games and stuff.
But they're made out of
this. Yeah, but they're made out of this shitty rubber-coated stuff that all peels off. So nobody actually uses that design in a modern sleeping bag kind of material. So it'd be awesome if like Snugpack or something could do that cool thing where they take it and make it into a dinosaur suit.
I've problem with mummy bags. Anyway. I've got a 52-inch chest, so getting me into, I can just about squeeze into some commercial sleeping bags, but I'm a bit like. If we get bumped in the night, I'm like, just under the zip. Oh, hello.
Have I told you about the time? I must have mentioned it in the past. My friend Jamie managed to explode himself out of a sleeping bag by bursting the zip. He just popped out of it whilst we were on a bit of downtime, just to emerge in his pants. The coolest thing was he just popped out of it and was like, "I'm a beautiful butterfly." And then he was like, "Shit, my sleeping bag's ripped now, and there's no way I'm ever going to be warm again." And it got to -14.
Gash says he's got two, Ben, if you want one.
Well, the German bags.
Yeah.
I dread to think what's gone on inside them, Gash.
Cool, okay. So it sounds like we're coming towards the end of the stream. Ben, have you got a kind of closing thought you want to divulge?
I just kind of like to reassure people. I don't know if there's many new airsofters watching this or older airsofters. I just want to reassure people that don't feel threatened or don't feel intimidated by not having loads of great gear. Also, don't waste your money on buying loads of shit gear. Don't try and buy it all too fast. Just buy it piece by piece until you know why you want it. But then don't also, when you get to a point and you think, "Oh, I really want one of those," don't feel like you're not good enough to own it, because let's be honest, none of us are. We're not running around risking our lives or anything like that, but it's a commercially available piece of equipment. So if you want it, get it, rock out on it and enjoy your time in it. And then you'll probably be able to sell it for just as much as you paid for it. And you will have had your great time in it, and somebody else will be able to have a great time in it afterwards. So just, enjoy.
Cool. I'll leave the stream running for a couple of minutes. If there's any questions from the viewers. Other than that, thank you very much, Ben. I think it's been a really interesting chat. I think it's
been great just to grab a couple of beers. And,
indeed. I think we've covered lots of ground. I mean, we've got, if you look back at our, Ben and I did a chat almost a couple of months ago now, Ben, when we did our top 10 favourite things. And a lot of the stuff we're talking about in that episode is kind of gear that we've used, liked, enjoyed, has had quality, and largely has a kind of quality of life benefit for our playing and for our airsoft. So I think if you want something to watch, you haven't watched that stream, that's a really good one to watch. It's got loads of little interesting bits in there, like stuff we've used and worn and used for years, and has been reliable. So that's a really good stream. I think one of the coming up soon. We're going to be doing. I want to try and get hold of a site operator and talk about the realities of running a site. I think a lot of people think it's kind of all glamour and glory, and it's not.
No, I think unfortunately a few people are going to have a few site operators might have a bit of spare time on their hands at the moment, because it may be a little while before games can get up and running properly. We're all dead keen for it to happen, but
yes,
we've got to make sure that the world stays in place and we don't all die of coronavirus.
There's been a couple of sites wanting to slightly prematurely open at the moment, which has been all over the Airsoft news. But yes, that got quite resoundingly shot down by the Airsoft community, which was actually quite nice to see. Some of the language used was a bit inappropriate, but in general, the theme was let's stay safe. It's just not worth it. Light out. I don't know anything about the gear that you were talking about, I'm afraid.
What was that one? Sorry.
It was asking about some very specific pieces of kit, which I don't know. I know absolutely nothing about. It's repo gear, repro clone gear. So I would love to help you, but I really don't know anything about the specific pieces of equipment you were talking about. I know you're talking about an ACOG with an RMR on it. They vary enormously from absolutely terrible to passable.
Doesn't even matter.
So I really can't help you.
It doesn't even matter what brand they've got on them. Sometimes they can be completely different every single time.
Some of them are solid. Some of them would fall apart as soon as you put. So I'm afraid I really can't help you. Maybe worth jumping on one of the Facebook groups and seeing if someone's got some specific experience with that item. Various price level. Jay asked, will there be any more videos comparing various price levels of gear? Like our combat trousers video. Yes, quite possibly. The difficulty is getting hold of stuff. It's I don't want to talk bollocks about something I don't own or haven't used or don't have any experience with. So
well, somebody's sent for you to say nice things about. It's difficult, isn't it?
I don't really do that, so that's quite difficult. I may well do at some point if I come across a clone plate carrier, compare it to a real one, something like that, if I get the opportunity. But again, I don't get sent kit. I don't get paid to do this. This is my hobby. Is in fact making videos about airsoft. I just spend a lot more time making videos about airsoft than I do airsofting. So, but yeah, cheers, lights out. Thanks for that, mate. So if there's any more, so I think we'll look at ending the stream there. Massive thanks to Ben for turning up at the Crown and
my pleasure.
Drinking some beer in the sun. Hopefully, we'll be able to actually go there. You never know. We might even do a live stream from the Crown if we're super lucky.
That'd be great.
Thanks to the viewers for turning up. You've been amazing as always. Thanks for all the questions and the comments. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye, guys.
Take it easy, guys.